Greetings, friends. It's me, Wayman, and this is a video going out to the Reb Shlomo, Atheists. Why does God have to be good? And what's interesting here is that um, my definition of good and evil is defined by the idea of virtue. And virtue is the measuring stick that I measure deities and people, gods and men. And apparently, you find this also in the Tanakh with Abraham. And I wanted to read that section because Abraham calls God out on justice. Here's Genesis 18:25. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that the innocent and the guilty fare alike. Be it far from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? So, by virtue, as I said before, we can measure whether men are just or unjust. And I fear that if a deity is committing unjust acts and acting in unjust ways and is being patterned by followers as an example and is creating laws, how can we think that those laws that were handed down by this unjust deity would be just in any way? You cannot have virtue and vice existing together. So this is the problem that I have. That the deity needs to be good or just or attain the highest forms of virtue because that is what the followers are striving to do. At least that is what I personally would strive to do, and virtue is my God. And it's the measurement by which all gods and men are measured. So, if a deity commits unjust acts, he is unjust, no matter if he's outside the system or not. And my fear is people who strive to be like those deities in every way, and to be godlike, so to speak, and attain the highest forms of the characteristics of those gods, they will also attain the highest forms of those vices, including the virtues. So, maybe that's why believers in some ways act so evil, because they are mimicking the vices of the deity, the examples of the deity, and rather than striving to attain the highest forms of virtue, they are following the actions of the deity, which may not be all that virtuous, and committing acts of vice against one another. So, forget about deities and use virtue as a measuring stick to become godlike and maybe even be a little bit better than the gods if you can by attaining the highest forms of virtue. And anybody can do that. Here's an excellent quote from Plato, Book 10, where it's talked about this. And the friends of the gods may be supposed to receive from them all things at their best, expecting only such evil as is necessary consequence of former sins. So it's talking about just deities. Then this must be our notion of the just man, that even when he is in poverty or sickness, or any other seeming misfortune, all things, in the end, work together for good to him in life and death. For the gods have a care of anyone whose desire is to become just and to be like God, as far as man can attain the divine likeness by the pursuit of virtue. Yes, says Glaucon, if he is like God, he will surely not be neglected by him. So, friends, if you're patterning your life after a god of vice, whether of this world or the hereafter, the gods of those vices will not forget you, and they will pay you what you are owed. So, Rather than following a deity, friends, pursue the highest forms of virtue and let that be your measuring stick for both gods and men. There is nothing outside the system of virtue. It is either virtuous or it is not. It is either trying to attain the highest forms of virtue. It is either an embodiment of those highest forms of virtue, or it is an embodiment of vice. So you make the decision by every decision that you make. So be good for goodness sake. That kind of rhymed, getting into poetry. Take care, friends, and remember, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.